Greetings, everybody. I am encouraging you to watch my video on the topic how the West was won, vagabonds in search of wealth and free labor. And because of that video, I decided to do this one about identity because it is something that I think we all need to think about. And this video is particularly for Jamaicans. I don't know so much about the other people in the Caribbean. I have a few friends that are from the Caribbean, but I don't really know them well enough to know their position or their thoughts on the topic of identity. But I find with Jamaican, and it's educated alike, the individuals who are uneducated and those who are well educated seem to have a problem with being called Africans. The African American people, which is the black people in America, they identify themselves as African American for the most part, seem to have no problem with identifying with their homeland. But I don't know if the Jamaican people don't understand. When I say Jamaican people, I'm not talking all Jamaican people because there are individuals who understand the difference. But the typical person seem to have some kind of conflict with identifying themselves as Africans. So I'm hoping that I will explain it in this video. First of all, when we think about ethnicity, we think of race. A lot of individuals are very confused. Now, I don't know if there's a group called black or there's a white group or, in terms of did God intend for us to have these categories? Chances are maybe not. But society always benefit from labeling individuals, always love to categorize things and people. And so we fall within the category of black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and all these different groups that we find ourselves in as human beings. But the problem is with the black people in Jamaica, they confuse nationality with ethnicity. For some reason, when you tell a lot of Jamaicans that they're African, they get very offended. And I'm wondering if that just has to do with that ancestral memory where they were forced into slavery and therefore became ashamed of that situation. So Africa demonstrates or represents that linkage to the past, which they want to deny. So Jamaicans get very offended and they'll say, I am not African, I'm Jamaican. And I want my Jamaican brothers and sisters to understand that you are African. Since we are in a world that likes to categorize people, if you're not African, you can't say Jamaica is a place, and not even a place where you were from originally. It's a place that slaves were brought. People were brought there that were called slaves. They were brought to Jamaica to produce sugar. But they came from Africa. They were taken on the transatlantic slave trade to Jamaica. Jamaicans, when the Europeans went to the island of Jamaica, they're called Amerindians. We know that that's not even their names, but that's what they were called. The Arawaks, the Caribs, they were living there. Black people do not come from Jamaica. They were brought there. And while you want to embrace the idea this is where you were born, it is not your homeland. You were born there. But the question I have for black people who either don't understand or in denial or just ashamed is, if a Caucasian person lives in Jamaica, does that individual ceases from being a Caucasian? Does that person stop being stop identifying with Europe? If that person's great 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 grandparents down the line came from Europe, does that person deny their European heritage? No, they don't. We have Chinese living in Jamaica, generations of Chinese that live in Jamaica. Do they not still consider themselves to be Chinese? are they removed from China or removed from Asia and become Jamaican because that's where they were born? No. So your identity is linked to your ethnicity. And so if you're proud of your Jamaican nationality, there's nothing wrong with that. But to deny your African heritage, it's ridiculous. It's embarrassing, and it is I don't know, foolhardy. You are African. As long as you're black, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, that makes you African. You're not African because you're born in Africa. You're African because your ancestry lies in Africa. I've never been to Africa. It is my hope to go there. But I don't understand why I would think it's a problem to identify myself as African when it's obvious that I am. It's so ridiculous to say that I don't want to be associated with Africa. I am not from there. And you make such a big ruckus about it. I think that is part of the problem that we face whenever Black people, wherever they are in the world, understand who they are and look to their homeland as that place, that heritage, that place where they identify with their own people. I think we'll have more solidarity, we'll have more unity in the world. If you're a Canadian born in this country and your ancestral past or history lies in Europe, that makes you European. Canadians, we all live here, and some of us have citizenship in this country, and we call ourselves Canadians. But in my mind, the Canadians are the First Nation people. But I enjoy the benefit of being a Canadian citizen. But I know that I'm an African first, African first, Jamaican next, and Canadian because I live here. I celebrate living in this space. But my true identity lies in Africa. Not ashamed of it. I'm very proud of it. I'm ashamed that I don't know the language, as I said before, and ashamed that the people in the country where I come from manage to still feel shame and degradation about being identified with Africa. And when people who are not educated are that way, I cannot understand this ignorance. Why are you ashamed to be associated with Africa? Why are you in denial, first of all? And if it's shame, why do you feel ashamed? Because if you're ashamed because you look to Africa and you see people that are hungry and starving, it is not their fault. That's nothing to be ashamed of. It is not their fault that others have gone to that place that is rich in resources. Africa, the continent of Africa, is a wealthy place, wealthy area, wealthy region, if I may call it that. And if people are hungry, it's not because there's something for them to be ashamed of. It's just shameful that the individuals around the world have found ways to exploit these areas, these regions, become enriched by it, while people die of hunger and famine and disease. I am African, and every Black person on this planet is African. We don't need to justify it, and we don't need to deny it. And every other person, regardless of where they were born, must look to their background and their heritage to find their true identity. Jamaicans, it's time to let go of that kind of ignorance and to identify with your brothers in Africa. The one thing we have to say Africa has its problems, but I'm yet to meet an African who was denied his heritage or her heritage. Every African I know is very proud of their homeland, and it doesn't matter what is happening there. When they come to these parts, they're only thinking of secure their wealth to return one day. And I admire them for that. I really admire them. Some of them will not even marry outside of their culture because they know how much it means to them and they plan to return. Us Jamaicans, we leave Jamaica, for example, and some of us, we don't even want to hear about it anymore. I guess it has to do, it's in our DNA, it's not our DNA, but it has something to do with the fact that we were brought by brute force to these parts. And it's almost like it's left us with a memory, ancestral memory, that leaves us so wounded. We can overcome. Our ancestors were very strong and they were able to overcome some terrible things in life. And by denying your heritage, your African heritage, you're denying the ancestors. And the spirits live, they live on, and they're troubled. Be blessed, everybody. Think on these things.